At 73, Princess Anne, the iron-willed daughter of the British monarchy, has shattered a silence she's held for over 4 decades. This time, she's not speaking for protocol or honor, but for truth. In a rare and raw confession, Anne named one woman who sowed division, manipulated emotions, and plunged the royal family into a spiral of unrelenting doubt. A woman who, despite Anne's formidable strength, once led her astray. In 1981, as the world fixated on Princess Diana, Anne stood quietly in the shadows. Her tireless contributions were overlooked, and in that moment, a cunning hand guided her away from the truth. A hidden letter, a haunting death, and a fateful confrontation that unveiled it all. This isn't just a story of blame. It's a journey of awakening late regret in a heart that misunderstood, now forced to face its past. Anne's confession doesn't just shake the royal inner circle. It's a searing lesson about truth, forgiveness, and the devastating cost of silence. Who did she name, and why did her silence leave such a painful legacy? The summer of 1981 was a dreamlike haze in Britain. On July 29th, Lady Diana Spencer, a shy yet radiant 20-year-old, glided into St. Paul's Cathedral to marry Prince Charles. Millions worldwide were glued to their screens, captivated by every detail of the lavish ceremony. Her 25-foot wedding train, the balcony kiss at Buckingham Palace, Diana's sparkling eyes, it was a fairy tale come to life. The press dubbed her the People's Princess, an icon of grace, compassion, and flawless beauty. Whether cradling a child in a hospital or stepping out in a dazzling sapphire gown, Diana ignited crowds and dominated headlines. Britain and perhaps the world fell in love. But in the cold, shadowed corridors of Buckingham Palace, where media glamour couldn't reach, another woman stood in silence, her gaze as sharp as steel. Princess Anne, Queen Elizabeth II's only daughter, was 31 and a relentless force in the royal machine. With over 500 public engagements a year, opening hospitals, attending charity events, representing the crown abroad, Anne was the monarchy's backbone. She competed in international equestrian events, shook thousands of hands, and maintained a grueling schedule that even younger royals couldn't match. Anne never chased the spotlight, but she took pride in her duty. She was action, not words. Yet as Diana's star blazed like wildfire, Anne's ceaseless efforts seemed to vanish into the dark. The crowds didn't chant her name. Newspapers barely mentioned her, save for brief notes like "Princess Anne attends charity event." Meanwhile, Diana's mere smile sent the world into a frenzy. Anne, with her blunt demeanor and iron discipline, couldn't fathom it. Why did a young woman new to the royal fold so effortlessly capture the nation's heart, while Anne, who'd given her youth to the crown, was forgotten? One late summer evening in the quiet study of Gatcombe Park, Anne sat across from her trusted aide, Margaret Rhodes. A dim desk lamp cast light on her resolute features, betraying a flicker of exhaustion. In her hand was a rare glass of whiskey, a small indulgence after a long day. Anne's voice cut through the stillness, sharp yet laced with deep frustration. "I do more than their whole lot combined, Margaret. I ride for charity until I'm bone-tired, open hospitals, shake hands until my wrist aches. I work for this country, for this family, but no one cares. They only see her." Margaret, an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes, nodded sympathetically. She'd been with Anne long enough to know this wasn't fleeting resentment. Her was unmistakable Diana, the new daughter-in-law, stealing the light Anne never thought she craved, but now quietly yearned for. Anne's words hung in the air, a silent declaration of war. A cold divide began to form between two women, one adored by the world, the other fading into obscurity. Anne's resentment wasn't just about unequal workloads. It was personal, raw, and tangled. To her, Diana wasn't just an innocent darling. She was an outsider, a media star who hadn't sweat for the crown or grasped the cost of duty. Anne saw Diana and sensed a performance, a carefully staged act to win public hearts. And deep within, a nagging question took root: was Diana truly who she seemed, or was it all a media-fueled deception? That question wouldn't find an answer soon. But it would pull Anne into a labyrinth of doubt, resentment, and dark secrets, a maze orchestrated by another woman, waiting in the wings for her moment to strike. In 1981, few in Britain's elite circles could match Camilla Parker Bowles's cunning and poise. Not yet an official royal, Camilla was a formidable presence in the halls of power. As Prince Charles's longtime confidant, she navigated glittering cocktail parties, lively polo matches, and ancient estates with the ease of someone who held every valuable secret. Camilla wasn't loud or ostentatious, but her eyes were sharp, always watching, always calculating. And in those eyes, she spotted an opportunity, a crack forming between Princess Anne and Princess Diana, a fissure she could deftly exploit to secure her own place. Camilla knew Anne better than most in the aristocracy. She understood Anne's strength, her bluntness, her steely will, and her deep pride in her royal service. Anne despised emotional theatrics and those who sought attention without earning it. Diana, with her effortless smile, gentle gaze, and natural public adoration, embodied everything Anne couldn't stand. But Camilla also knew Anne wasn't easily swayed. Anne was sharp, intuitive, and wary of hidden motives. Worse, Anne distrusted Camilla, who had married Andrew Parker Bowles. Anne's former love from the 1970s, a wound Anne had never fully healed. To plant doubt in Anne's mind, Camilla had to act with exquisite precision, guiding Anne to her own conclusions without feeling manipulated. The chance came on a radiant afternoon at a polo match in Windsor, where the elite gathered to revel in the vibrant atmosphere and flex their status. The stands were adorned with fluttering banners and fresh flowers, the thunder of hooves blending with the crowd's chatter. Anne, in simple but regal riding gear, had just finished a striking match. Sweat beaded on her brow as she stood alone near the rest tent, her eyes scanning the buzzing crowd. At its center was Diana, newly arrived in an emerald silk dress glowing like the sun. Reporters swarmed her, cameras flashing to capture every smile, every graceful wave. Anne gripped her gloves tighter, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. It wasn't Diana's shine that stung Anne, never craved the stage, but the injustice she felt. She'd spent the day competing, representing the crown, yet no one noticed. They only saw Diana, who seemed to win hearts without effort. Deep down, an old wound throbbed memories of Andrew Parker Bowles, the man she'd loved, now Camilla's husband. Though Anne no longer cared for Andrew, Camilla's marriage to him left a bitter sting, a reason Anne kept her at arm's length. Camilla, in a wide-brimmed hat shielding her from the sun, approached Anne quietly. Her smile was faint, almost imperceptible, but her eyes glinted with intent, probing Anne's every reaction. She stood close enough for privacy, but far enough to avoid intrusion. "Remarkable, isn't it?" Camilla said, her voice low and deliberate, nodding toward Diana's media frenzy. "How she captivates the world with just a smile. So effortless, so perfect. Meanwhile, and no one spares a glance for the long days you pour into upholding the crown's honor. Do they?" Her words struck like a well-aimed arrow, piercing Anne's pride. But Anne wasn't one to be swayed easily, especially by Camilla, whom she never fully trusted. She turned to face her, eyes icy, weighing each word. Camilla wasn't her friend, and Anne knew she wasn't selfless. Memories of Andrew flashed through Anne's mind, a reminder that Camilla always had an agenda. "She has a gift for being loved," Anne replied evenly, her voice tinged with bitterness. "But I'm not here to compete with anyone." Yet in that moment, Diana's radiant, celebrated image grew more grating than ever. Camilla's subtle nudge had touched a raw nerve, Anne's sense of being undervalued, overlooked. Camilla didn't press further. She knew patience was key with someone like Anne. She offered a discreet smile, her eyes flashing with quiet satisfaction, then walked away, leaving Anne alone with her churning thoughts. But Anne wasn't entirely swayed. A part of her mind warned Camilla wasn't trustworthy. She always had motives, and her marriage to Andrew only deepened Anne's skepticism. Anne vowed not to let emotions cloud her judgment, to see clearly before judging Diana. Yet the seed of doubt had been planted, and despite her resolve, it quietly took root. In the weeks that followed, Camilla continued her strategy, but with doubled caution around Anne's sharp instincts. At a formal dinner in a Gloucestershire estate, when Anne offhandedly mentioned the media's bias toward Diana, Camilla replied casually, "Diana does have a knack for making everyone believe she's the only one who cares, doesn't she? While the real work like yours goes unnoticed." Her tone was light, almost empathetic, but Anne sensed an ulterior motive. She met Camilla's gaze, a spark of wariness in her eyes. Perhaps Anne said coolly, "But I don't need validation from those who don't understand duty." Still, Camilla's words left a mark like a steady drip, eroding Anne's defenses. Anne never saw Camilla as reliable. Camilla's marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles, Anne's first love, had left a scar that never fully faded. Though Anne had moved on with her own marriage and 2 children, The betrayal lingered, keeping her guarded around Camilla. But the public and media's unfairness made Camilla's whispers potent. Anne began to view Diana through a lens of suspicion, not because she fully trusted Camilla, but because her own frustration with Diana grew. Diana to Anne was no longer just a naive young woman. She became a rival, someone who, though Anne wouldn't admit it, seemed to steal the recognition Anne quietly craved. Anne's inner struggle between her sharp reason and wounded emotions was complicated by her past with Camilla. She knew Camilla wasn't selfless, but her words struck at Anne's pain, the feeling of being overshadowed, undervalued. This tension would draw Anne into a dangerous game where truth was obscured, trust was tested, and regrets would haunt her forever. In 1982, Prince William's birth brought joy and hope to the British royal family. 2 years later, Prince Harry's arrival completed the picture of Charles and Diana's family. Britain rejoiced, newspapers flooded with images of Diana, beaming beside her sons, her golden hair and warm smile like sunlight. She was hailed as the epitome of motherhood, a perfect mother and compassionate princess. But in the royal family's hidden corners, the joy didn't touch everyone. For Princess Anne, the birth of her nephews wasn't just a family milestone, it was another blade slicing into her pride. Anne, the devoted royal aunt, took pride in supporting the Queen and upholding the monarchy's image. She'd given her youth to public duties, from African charity missions to representing the crown at global events. To her, family wasn't just blood, it was duty. So when the godparent list for William and Harry were announced, and her name was absent, Anne felt a sacred bond had been severed. The decision, though private and made by Charles and Diana for their own reasons, felt like a public slap to her dignity. Anne rarely showed emotion, but in that moment she felt a smoldering anger, not just toward Diana, but toward a system pushing her to the margins. The tension between Anne and Diana had grown beyond their early differences. Each time Diana appeared in the press, praised for her warmth with the public, Anne felt her own efforts diminished. And as Diana became a symbol of motherhood, Anne a devoted mother to Zara, and Peter felt unfairly compared. To her, Diana wasn't just a beloved young woman. She was a threat, someone who, intentionally or not, was overshadowing the values Anne stood for. The chance to voice her true feelings came one September afternoon in 1984 at a press event at Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital. As the hospital's patron, Anne had just delivered a speech on pediatric care. The crowd applauded politely, but reporters quickly shifted focus to Prince Harry's recent birth. A bold journalist thrust a microphone forward. "Your Highness, how do you feel about Princess Diana welcoming another son?" Exhausted from a long day, Anne replied curtly, her tone flat. "Oh, it's nice." To her, it was a neutral, proper response. But the tabloids, hungry for drama, twisted it into something sinister. The next morning, headlines screamed, "Cold Princess reacts to nephew and Anne jealous of Diana." Some articles even speculated that Anne was envious of Diana's fame, unable to accept being outshone by a younger in-law. Anne read the headlines at breakfast in Gatcombe Park, her grip crumpling the newspaper. "Cold jealous," she muttered to Margaret Rhodes, seated across from her. "I spoke the truth, but they want a villain." Margaret Wise, from years of royal drama, nodded quietly, knowing the story wasn't just the media's fault. An unseen hand was stirring the pot, and Anne, with her keen instincts, sensed it too. That hand belonged to Camilla Parker Bowles. Though she never openly attacked Diana in front of Anne, Camilla was a master of subtle manipulation. At a Gloucestershire dinner, when Anne mentioned the media's favoritism toward Diana, Camilla smiled, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Oh, Diana's quite clever, isn't she?" she said lightly, as if discussing the weather. "She always knows how to make people think she's the victim. Quite admirable if you think about it." Her words spread like ink in water, clouding Anne's thoughts. Camilla didn't need to say more. A single remark reinforced Anne's growing belief that Diana wasn't the innocent the public adored. To Anne, Diana became a calculated player, using public sympathy to craft a perfect image. Each glowing article, each cheering crowd strengthened that belief, all fueled by the seeds of doubt Camilla had sown. The rift between Anne and Diana, though never openly explosive, became a quiet undercurrent in the royal family, like a crack slowly widening. While Anne pressed on with her packed schedule, opening rural schools representing the Queen abroad, Diana remained the media's darling, but that glamour began to show flaws. By 1989, rumors of Diana and Charles' crumbling marriage surfaced, with tabloids whispering about Camilla's return to Charles' life. The public still adored Diana, but the elite began murmuring about her public spats with Charles, her somber eyes, and her desperate efforts to maintain a happy family image. Anne, who valued royal duty over personal feelings, viewed Diana's troubles with a mix of disdain and confusion. At a private Sandringham dinner in the winter of 1989, Anne overheard nobles discussing Diana overdoing it at a charity event, crying on camera over family stress. One, with a mocking tone, said she knows how to make the world pity her, but no one asks what Charles endures. Anne, standing nearby with a glass of wine, didn't join in, but her eyes flickered with agreement. To her, Diana's public tears were weakness, a performance unfit for royal responsibility. Yet Anne wasn't entirely cold. In a rare moment at a London charity event, she watched Diana from afar. Diana, in a vibrant red dress, knelt to speak with orphaned children, her smile genuine, but her eyes hiding a deep sadness. Anne, though reluctant to admit it, sensed Diana was enduring something profound. But instead of approaching, Anne turned away, telling herself Diana's troubles were her own. She chose the spotlight, Anne thought, so she must face it alone. This distance wasn't just Anne's doing. Diana, sensitive and craving connection, found Anne too rigid, too distant to confide in. In a private chat with a friend, Diana once said, "Anne works tirelessly, but I don't know how to talk to her. I feel like she thinks I'm a fraud." Those words, never reaching Anne, revealed a painful truth. Both women, despite their differences, sought validation, but neither could breach the invisible wall between them. Meanwhile, Camilla watched from the shadows. She didn't need to intervene directly. The simmering tension between Anne and Diana, combined with Diana's marital woes, did her work for her. But at another dinner, when Anne and Camilla stood side by side, Camilla dropped another spark. Poor Diana, isn't she? Trying so hard to keep it all perfect, but everyone sees her breaking. Anne didn't reply, only sipped her wine, but in her mind, Diana's image grew more complex, part pitiable, part culpable. By 1996, Princess Diana was no longer the radiant bride of the royal family. Her marriage to Prince Charles had collapsed, leaving scars on both and tarnishing the monarchy's image. Living alone at Kensington Palace, Diana was hounded by paparazzi flashes and relentless public scrutiny. Yet beneath her global icon status, she carried a profound loneliness. Despite being adored by millions, she felt like an outsider in the royal family, where smiles often masked distance and whispers cut deeper than knives. Among those who hurt her most was Princess Anne, the aunt she admired but could never reach. Diana knew Anne didn't like her. She felt it in Anne's cold stares, curt words, and heavy silences. But Diana didn't understand why. With her sincere nature and sensitive heart, she wondered if she'd unintentionally hurt Anne or if something larger divided them. In a rare moment of courage, Diana decided it was time to clear the air. She wanted to build a bridge, however fragile, to connect two women separated by prejudice and poisonous whispers. One March evening in 1996, in her cozy Kensington Palace apartment, Diana sat at a small walnut writing desk. A soft golden lamp illuminated her face, revealing faint lines around her eyes, marks of years of strain. Before her was a sheet of royal-crested stationery, a symbol of the tradition she both cherished and resented. Pen in hand, her fingers hovered over the paper, hesitant. Then, as if guided by her heart, she began to write. The words flowed, gentle yet powerful. "Dear Anne, I've never wanted to hurt anyone, especially you. I know we're different. You're strong, disciplined, while I'm perhaps too emotional. But I've always admired your dedication, the way you work tirelessly for this country. I only want us to understand each other better. If you're willing, I'd love to meet and talk. With all sincerity, Diana." The letter was brief, but every word carried raw honesty. Diana folded the paper, sealed it with red wax, and handed it to a trusted aide with clear instructions. "Make sure this reaches Princess Anne through Clarence House. No one else must open it." She smiled, her eyes sparkling with hope. In her mind, she pictured a meeting, perhaps tense, but a start toward understanding. She didn't know that her letter, carrying the chance for reconciliation, would never reach its destination. At Clarence House, the letter landed in the hands of Sir Edward Langley, a senior official fiercely loyal to Prince Charles. Silver-haired and sharp-eyed Sir Edward had served the royals for decades. He also quietly supported Camilla Parker Bowles, believing Charles's stability depended on her. When Diana's letter arrived, Sir Edward opened it, a breach of protocol he justified as risk assessment. Scanning the words, he frowned. "Reconciliation with Anne now," he muttered. To him, the letter wasn't just Diana's personal plea. It was a threat to the royal family's fragile balance, especially as Camilla solidified her position. Sir Edward didn't act alone. That night, in a discreet room at a Mayfair gentleman's club, he met Camilla under the flicker of candlelight. Camilla, in a sleek black dress, her eyes razor-sharp, listened as Sir Edward described the letter. "Diana wants to meet Anne," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "If Anne reads this, they might reconcile. And if that happens, Anne could question what she's been led to believe about Diana, and perhaps about Charles and you." Camilla gripped her wine glass, her lips tightening into a thin line. She knew the power of an Anne convinced by Diana's sincerity. If the two reconciled, the whispers Camilla had carefully planted in Anne's mind over years could unravel. "We can't let that happen," Camilla said, her voice icy but calculated. "Hide the letter, Edward. Don't let it reach Anne, and ensure no one knows." Sir Edward nodded, though a flicker of unease stirred within him. Back at Clarence House, he opened a secret drawer in his office, tucked the letter inside, and locked it away. The letter, Diana's fragile hope, was buried in darkness, gathering dust among forgotten files. But the act wasn't entirely unseen. A young secretary, Abigail, overheard Sir Edward discussing the princess's letter with a colleague. Loyal to Diana and terrified, Abigail scribbled in her diary, "Letter to Princess Anne withheld." "I don't know what to do." Too scared to speak, she stayed silent, but her note would prove crucial years later. Months later, at a charity gala at London's Savoy Hotel, Anne and Camilla stood side by side in a quiet corner. The elite crowd buzzed about Diana, her African charity missions, her enduring charm, and how she still outshone the royals. Anne, her face composed but tense, sipped champagne, her eyes drifting to the glittering chandeliers above. Camilla, sensing an opening, leaned closer, her tone soft but laced with intent. "I hear Diana meant to write something to you," she said, her lips curving into an enigmatic smile. "But I suppose you wouldn't care to hear it, would you? She always knows how to look the saint." The remark, seemingly innocent, struck precisely at Anne's doubts. Anne shrugged, replying curtly, "What could she write that I haven't heard?" But inwardly, the idea that Diana was playing the martyr to polish her image took hold. Another act, Anne thought, unaware that Camilla was the true puppeteer. Camilla smiled faintly and walked away, leaving Anne with her tangled thoughts. But the moment had consequences. Abigail, working backstage at the gala, watched their exchange from afar, her heart pounding as she caught the word letter. Fear kept her silent, but she resolved that one day the truth about the letter would emerge, though she didn't know it would come too late to change Diana's fate. Diana's letter, her chance to heal the rift, remained locked in Clarence House's shadows. And the gap between Anne and Diana, instead of closing, was widened by Camilla's calculated lies. Yet in the darkness, a faint light flickered, Abigail's diary note, a tiny clue that would one day lead to the truth. On August 31st, 1997, the world reeled as news broke of Princess Diana's death in a horrific car crash in a Paris tunnel. Britain plunged into grief. Millions lined the streets, laying flowers outside Kensington Palace, mourning the woman who touched their hearts with her kindness and radiant smile. Newspapers overflowed with images of Diana from her early days as the royal bride to her final moments as an independent advocate. But amid the loss, the royal family faced a storm of criticism. The public raged at their initial silence, seeing it as cold detachment. Princess Anne, as always, maintained her stoic facade. While Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Charles were scrutinized, Anne quietly fulfilled her duties. At a public event days after Diana's death, a reporter asked how she felt about the princess's passing. Anne replied evenly, almost emotionless, "Sometimes those who speak loudest aren't heard." The cryptic remark sparked endless analysis. Some saw it as a veiled jab at Diana, who always drew attention. Others sensed regret, though no one could be sure. But beneath Anne's iron exterior, something stirred. In private moments away from the spotlight and cameras, a shift began. One overcast afternoon in late September 1997, at a family gathering in Balmoral Castle, Anne sat quietly in the vast drawing room, her gaze fixed on two boys, Prince William and Harry. Now motherless, they tried to appear strong, but their hollow eyes betrayed their pain. William, just 15, stared down, hands clasped tightly. Harry, only 12, gripped his chair, fighting tears. Watching them, Anne felt a sharp pang in her chest, not anger or resentment, but deep regret. She thought of Diana, of the years they'd lived as family, yet remained strangers. Had she misjudged Diana? Was everything she'd believed that Diana was calculating, a media star chasing fame, true? The question, though fleeting, planted a seed of doubt, not about Diana, but about her own convictions. Years passed, and that doubt seemed buried under time's dust. Anne pressed on, working tirelessly, the monarchy's silent pillar. But on a frigid winter day in 2022, an unexpected event brought clarity, as if fate demanded the truth return. A retired Clarence House servant, now elderly, visited Anne at Gatcombe Park. In his hands was a small, dust-covered wooden box. "Your Highness," he said, his voice trembling with age, "I found this in the archives. I believe it's yours." Anne opened the box to find a yellowed envelope, its seal intact, bearing Kensington Palace's crest. Her heart quickened as she recognized the handwriting, Diana's. With trembling hands, she opened it, and the words leaped out like a voice from the past. "Dear Anne, I never meant to take anyone's light. I just didn't know how to live without showing my heart. I admire you, and I hope one day we can understand each other better." Anne read it again and again, each word a blade through the armor she'd worn for decades. The letter, written in 1996, just a year before Diana's death, was a sincere plea for connection, destroyed not by Diana, but by Camilla's calculated silence. Anne sat in her study, the fire crackling, but its warmth couldn't thaw the chill gripping her heart. She realized she'd let Camilla's toxic whispers guide her, letting resentment blind her to the truth. Now, with the truth laid bare, Diana was gone, unable to hear her apology. On May 14, 2023, King Charles III's coronation unfolded in majestic splendor at Westminster Abbey. Millions worldwide watched as Charles, after a lifetime of waiting, became Britain's king. Beside him stood Camilla, now queen consort, ascending with a calm smile that couldn't hide her pride. Her crown sparkled, but to Princess Anne the title was a hollow sheen, masking a woman she'd never respect. Anne, in regal attire, stood among family, her gaze razor-sharp, observing every detail with quiet contempt. Camilla, who'd married Andrew Parker Bowles, Anne's old flame, and fueled the rift between her and Diana, would never earn Anne's trust or affection. Within Anne, a storm of emotions raged. Diana's letter, discovered months earlier in 2022, haunted her. Its words, "I never meant to take anyone's light. I just didn't know how to live without showing my heart," pierced the armor Anne had built. The letter wasn't just a reminder of her misjudgment of Diana. It was undeniable proof of Camilla's role in sowing doubt, driving the women apart to secure her own position. Anne, with her keen instincts, always knew Camilla wasn't selfless. Camilla's marriage to Andrew, Anne's first love, only deepened her disdain. To Anne, Camilla wasn't just manipulative, she was betrayal incarnate, both emotionally and in loyalty to the crown. Days after the coronation, at a London public event, a bold reporter asked a question that hushed the crowd. "Your Highness, do you see Camilla as the true queen?" The question hung like a blade. Anne paused, her eyes locking onto the reporter with icy resolve. She replied, her voice steady but cutting, "I respect her position for the sake of duty. But titles don't make a queen in the people's hearts, and Camilla will never have the love Diana did." Her words rippled like a stone in still water, sparking a media frenzy. Headlines dissected every syllable, some calling it a defense of Diana's legacy, others noting Anne's clear contempt, not just for Camilla's title, but for her very being. For Camilla, Anne's words were a direct blow, cracking the poised mask she'd crafted. Though she maintained her composure, Camilla felt the weight of the truth. Anne had exposed a truth she'd buried for years. In a belated attempt to mend fences, Camilla sent a handwritten letter to Gatcombe Park, sealed with care, its words unusually sincere. "Dear Anne, I lacked courage back then. I let misunderstandings fester, and I was wrong to do nothing. I hope you can understand and forgive." But to Anne, it was another of Camilla's performances, a woman she'd never trust, not just for her past schemes, but for the old wound of marrying Andrew. Camilla to Anne was deception personified, now trying to mask her guilt with empty apologies. Anne read the letter in her Gatcombe study, her expression cold and unmoved. She folded it, set it aside, and didn't bother replying. Camilla wasn't worth her words. Instead, one early morning, Anne quietly visited Kensington Palace, Diana's former home. Before a black and white photo of the late princess, placed in a small memorial garden, Anne laid a single white lily, symbolizing purity and regret. She stood there, her gaze softening, as if whispering an apology to Diana, the woman she'd misunderstood for so long. This wasn't forgiveness for Camilla, but a vow to Diana that her memory would be cherished and Anne would never let Camilla taint her legacy again. Anne's quiet gesture didn't escape the media. A photo of her placing the flower went viral, sparking speculation about its meaning. To the public, it was a rare glimpse of Anne, the stoic royal, revealing her heart. But for Camilla, it was a stinging reminder that despite her title, she'd never have the love or respect Diana commanded, or crucially, Anne's acceptance. Anne's contempt for Camilla stemmed not just from her manipulations, but from the lingering scar of Andrew Parker Bowles, whose marriage to Camilla left an indelible mark of betrayal. To Anne, Camilla wasn't just insincere, she was a living reminder of wounds that would never fully heal.